The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the New Mexico territory as Beatrice Harper's world faded in and out of consciousness, her throat parched and lips cracked from dehydration. Only her head remained above the desert sand, her body buried beneath the baking earth that held her like a vise. The tears had long since dried on her cheeks, leaving trails of salt that stung her sunburned skin. She had stopped screaming hours ago when her voice gave out, leaving only the distant cry of a circling vulture to keep her company as she waited for death to claim her. It was 1878, and the harsh justice of the frontier had condemned her without trial. Beatrice had been 23 years old when they dragged her from her small home on the outskirts of Columbus, New Mexico, accusing her of a crime she didn't commit. Now, as the sun began its second journey across the sky since they'd buried her, Beatrice's hope diminished with each labored breath. Miles away, Zachariah Daniels pulled his hat lower over his eyes as he guided his chestnut mare across the desert expanse. At 30 years old, he'd seen his share of cruelty on the frontier, but nothing had prepared him for what lay ahead. The trail he followed had grown faint, but something instinct, perhaps, kept him moving forward through the shimmering heat waves that distorted the horizon. "Easy, Penny," he murmured to his horse as they crested a small rise. Zachariah had been tracking a band of outlaws for 3 days, following the trail of those who had robbed the Columbus Bank and killed the sheriff in the process. As a former Texas Ranger turned bounty hunter, he knew these lands better than most, but even he wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted him in the distance. At first, he thought it was a mirage, a strange formation in the sand. But as he drew closer, the unmistakable shape of a human head emerged from the ground. His heart hammered against his ribs as he spurred Penny forward, the mare's hooves kicking up clouds of dust as they raced toward the macabre scene. Beatrice's eyes were closed, her face blistered from the sun when Zachariah reached her. For a terrible moment, he thought he was too late, that he had found nothing more than a corpse in this makeshift grave. Then her eyelids fluttered. "Water," he whispered, quickly dismounting and rushing to her side. He uncorked his canteen and carefully moistened her lips. "Don't drink too fast, just a little." Her eyes opened slowly, the once vibrant blue now dulled with pain and confusion. She tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped her throat. "Don't try to talk," Zachariah urged, already pulling a shovel from his saddlebag. "I'm getting you out of here." The sand was packed hard around her, baked by the sun into a prison of earth. Zachariah dug frantically, careful not to injure her further as he excavated the woman from her living grave. Sweat poured down his face, soaking through his shirt as he worked. An hour passed before he had freed her enough to begin pulling her from the ground. Beatrice's body was limp as he finally extracted her completely, her simple dress torn and her skin burned and bruised. She was alive, but barely. Zachariah wrapped her in his spare blanket and lifted her onto Penny, mounting behind her to support her weakened frame. "I've got you now," he assured her, one arm securing her against his chest as he guided the horse toward a small outcropping of rocks where they might find shade. "You're going to be all right." Beatrice slipped in and out of consciousness as they rode. Zachariah could feel her shallow breathing against him and pushed Penny harder, knowing that time was precious. They reached the rocky shelter as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the desert floor. He carefully laid Beatrice on the ground in the shade and set about making a small camp. He had basic medical supplies in his saddlebags, a habit from his ranger days, and he used them now to clean her face and arms, applying salve to the worst of the burns. Night fell, bringing with it the desert's bitter cold. Zachariah built a small fire and kept watch as Beatrice slept fitfully. By the fire's glow, he could better assess her condition. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark hair matted with sand and dirt. Despite the ordeal she had suffered, there was a strength in her features that impressed him. It was near midnight when she finally spoke, her voice cracked but audible. "Why did you save me?" Zachariah looked up from the fire, surprised. Any decent man would have done the same. She laughed bitterly, the sound like broken glass. "There aren't many decent men left in this territory." "Who did this to you?" he asked, offering her more water. Beatrice took a careful sip before answering. "Samuel Blackstone and his men. They said I killed his brother." She shook her head weakly. "I didn't, I wouldn't, but they wouldn't listen." Zachariah's jaw tightened. He knew of Samuel Blackstone, a wealthy rancher with a reputation for taking justice into his own hands. Blackstone and his men were also the ones he had been tracking for the Columbus Bank robbery. "Blackstone's been busy," Zachariah muttered. "He and his gang robbed the bank in Columbus 3 days ago, shot the sheriff dead." Beatrice closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Sheriff Morgan was a good man. He believed me when I told him I didn't kill James Blackstone." "What happened?" Zachariah asked gently. "I found James dead on my property," she explained, her voice strengthening as she spoke. "He'd been courting me against his brother's wishes. Samuel always said I wasn't good enough for a Blackstone. When I found James with a knife in his chest, I ran to get help. Samuel and his men intercepted me on the road." She swallowed hard. "They didn't even let me explain. Just dragged me out here, said they'd give me the slowest death they could think of." Zachariah's hand instinctively moved to the pistol at his hip. "They'll pay for this," he promised. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." "There's nowhere safe for me now," Beatrice whispered. "Not with Samuel Blackstone wanting me dead." "I know a place," Zachariah assured her. "An old friend has a ranch about a day's ride from here. We'll rest there until you're stronger." Beatrice studied him in the firelight, her gaze sharp despite her weakened state. "Why would you risk yourself for me? You don't even know me." Zachariah stoked the fire, considering her question. "I've seen too much injustice go unpunished in these territories, and I'm already after Blackstone for the bank robbery. Seems like fate put us on the same path." "Fate," she repeated softly, "or just bad luck. Get some rest," he told her, avoiding her question. "We'll head out at first light." Dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Beatrice had slept through the night, her body desperate for recovery. Zachariah had kept watch, his mind churning with plans and possibilities. He knew that helping this woman meant making an enemy of Samuel Blackstone, but something in her story had stirred his sense of justice, and something in her eyes had stirred something deeper. As Beatrice awoke, Zachariah offered her a small portion of dried meat and hardtack from his provisions. She ate slowly, methodically, as if relearning how to nourish herself. "I never asked your name," she said finally, her voice stronger than the previous night. "Zachariah Daniels," he replied. "Most folks call me Zach." "Beatrice Harper," she offered in return. "Thank you, Zachariah, for my life," he nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Can you ride today? We should move on." Beatrice attempted to stand, her legs wobbling beneath her like a newborn colt. Zachariah caught her arm, steadying her as she found her balance. "I can ride," she insisted, though her face had paled with the effort of standing. "I won't slow you down." He helped her onto Penny, then mounted behind her once more. "The ranch is about 20 miles northeast. My friend Thomas Wilson owns it. He was a ranger with me years back." "A Texas Ranger?" Beatrice asked, leaning against him as the horse began to move. "Is that what you are?" Zachariah corrected. "Now I hunt bounties, tracking down men like Blackstone." They rode in silence for a time, the rhythm of the horse's hooves the only sound across the vast expanse of desert. Beatrice gradually relaxed against him, either from trust or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. "How did you find me?" she asked eventually. "I was tracking Blackstone and his men after the bank robbery. Their trail led in your direction." He paused. "Truth is, I almost missed you. If Penny hadn't spooked at something, I might have ridden right past." Beatrice reached down to pat the mare's neck. "Then I owe my life to your horse as well." "Penny's got good instincts," Zachariah agreed. "Better than mine sometimes." The sun climbed higher as they traveled, its heat intensifying. Zachariah felt Beatrice's breathing grow more labored and stopped in the shade of a lone cottonwood tree to let her rest. Her face was flushed, her skin hot to the touch. "You've got a fever," he said, concern evident in his voice. "We need to get you to Thomas's place faster." "I'm fine," she insisted, but her eyes were too bright, her words slightly slurred. Zachariah studied the terrain ahead, making a quick decision. "There's a shortcut through Rattlesnake Canyon. It's rougher terrain, but it'll cut half a day off our journey." "Whatever you think is best," Beatrice murmured, her head dropping against his chest. They pressed on, Zachariah pushing Penny harder than he would have liked, but the mare seemed to sense the urgency and maintained a steady pace. By mid-afternoon they entered the canyon, a narrow passage between towering red rock formations. "Stay with me, Beatrice," Zachariah urged as he felt her growing more limp in his arms. "We're almost there." "James didn't deserve to die," she mumbled, her words disjointed as the fever took hold. "He was going to stand up to Samuel, going to marry me anyway." Zachariah tightened his grip around her waist. "Save your strength. You can tell me everything when you're better." "No one will believe me," she continued, as if she hadn't heard him. "Samuel owns half the territory. He'll find me. He'll finish what he started." "Not while I'm around," Zachariah promised, his voice hard with determination. The canyon opened onto a wide valley, and in the distance, the Wilson Ranch came into view. It was a modest spread with a sturdy main house, a barn, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Smoke curled from the chimney, a welcome sight after their long journey. As they approached, a man emerged from the house, rifle in hand. He lowered it when he recognized Zachariah. "Zach, is that you?" Thomas Wilson called, stepping off the porch. "It's me, Tom," Zachariah confirmed, bringing Penny to a stop. "I need your help." Thomas rushed forward, his weathered face creased with concern as he took in the sight of Beatrice. "What happened?" "She needs a doctor," Zachariah said, carefully dismounting and lifting Beatrice from the saddle. "And a safe place to recover." "Bring her inside," Thomas directed, leading the way. "Sarah," he called to his wife, "prepare a bed. We've got someone hurt." Sarah Wilson appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Beatrice in Zachariah's arms, but she quickly composed herself and hurried back inside to prepare. Beatrice was placed in a small bedroom off the main house. Sarah, a former nurse during the war between the states, immediately set about examining her while Thomas pulled Zachariah aside. "What kind of trouble are you in now?" Thomas asked, his voice low. Zachariah explained the situation: Beatrice's accusation, her burial in the desert, and his pursuit of Blackstone for the bank robbery. Thomas whistled low. "Samuel Blackstone is not a man to cross lightly, Zach. He's got money and men, and he's not afraid to use either." "He buried an innocent woman alive, Tom," Zachariah replied, his eyes hard. "He killed a sheriff. He needs to answer for that. And who's going to make him? The law. The nearest marshal is 3 days' ride, and half the local lawmen are in Blackstone's pocket." "Then I'll do it myself," Zachariah stated simply. Thomas studied his old friend, seeing the determination in his stance. You always did have a strong sense of justice. But this is more than that, isn't it? Something about this woman. Before Zachariah could respond, Sarah emerged from the bedroom, her expression grave. She's very ill, Sarah reported. Exposure, dehydration, and her wounds are infected. I've done what I can, but she needs more care than I can provide. Will she survive? Zachariah asked, his voice tight. Sarah hesitated. I believe so, with proper care and time, but she'll be weak for a while. She can stay here as long as she needs, Thomas assured him. No one will find her. Zachariah nodded gratefully. I need to go after Blackstone. The longer I wait, the colder his trail gets. You're planning to take on Blackstone and his entire gang alone? Thomas asked incredulously. That's suicide, Zach. I'm not planning to confront them directly, Zachariah clarified. I need evidence of the bank robbery, something that will convince a federal marshal to take action. And what about the girl? Thomas pressed. She accused him of murdering his own brother. That's a serious charge without evidence. One thing at a time, Zachariah replied. First, I need to find proof of the robbery, then we can work on clearing Beatrice's name. Sarah placed a hand on Zachariah's arm. At least stay the night. Rest, gather supplies. You won't do anyone any good if you're dead. Zachariah reluctantly agreed, though his instinct was to pursue immediately. After a hot meal, the first real food he'd had in days, he checked on Beatrice. She was sleeping fitfully, her face still flushed with fever, but Sarah had cleaned her wounds and changed her into a fresh nightgown. He sat beside the bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest. In sleep, with her dark hair spread across the pillow, she looked younger, more vulnerable. The strength he had glimpsed in her features was still there, but tempered now by her ordeal. I'll make this right, he whispered, not sure if he was promising her or himself. Blackstone will pay for what he's done. As if she had heard him, Beatrice's eyes fluttered open. Zachariah. She murmured, her voice barely audible. I'm here, he assured her, taking her hand. It felt small and hot in his grasp. You're safe now. Don't leave, she pleaded, her fingers tightening around his. They'll find me. No one will hurt you here, he promised. Thomas and Sarah will look after you while I'm gone. Gone? Panic flashed in her eyes. Where are you going? Zachariah hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm going after Blackstone. I need evidence of the bank robbery to bring him to justice. He'll kill you, Beatrice whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Just like he killed James. Just like he tried to kill me. I've dealt with men like Blackstone before, Zachariah assured her, though in truth, he had never faced someone with quite as much power and influence. Get well, Beatrice. When I return, we'll clear your name. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Be careful, Zachariah. I couldn't bear it if you died because of me. Her words stirred something inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. I'll return, he promised, gently squeezing her hand before releasing it. Beatrice closed her eyes, exhaustion claiming her once more. Zachariah stayed until her breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly left the room. Thomas was waiting in the main living area, a map spread out on the table. If you're determined to do this, you might as well do it smart, he said, gesturing for Zachariah to join him. Together, they plotted the most likely locations for Blackstone and his men. The Blackstone Ranch was the obvious starting point, but Thomas also marked several other possibilities: a lined shack in the foothills, an abandoned mining camp, and a small cabin near the border where smugglers were known to operate. Blackstone's got friends in Mexico, Thomas explained. If he's planning to lie low for a while, he might cross over. Zachariah studied the map. I'll start with the ranch. Even if he's not there, I might find something connecting him to the robbery. That's his stronghold, Thomas warned. He'll have men watching. I'm not planning to walk in the front door, Zachariah replied with a grim smile. I'll observe first, wait for nightfall. They continued planning well into the evening, Thomas providing what information he had about Blackstone's operation. By the time they finished, Zachariah had a clear strategy and Thomas had reluctantly accepted that his friend wouldn't be deterred. At least take one of my men with you, Thomas urged. Miguel's a good shot and knows the territory. But Zachariah shook his head. I work better alone. Besides, I'm not looking to start a war, just gather evidence. Thomas sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of Zachariah's jaw. Your bedroll's in the bunkhouse. Get some rest. You can head out at first light. Zachariah thanked him and retreated to the bunkhouse, but sleep eluded him. His mind kept returning to Beatrice, her courage, her resilience, and the trust she had placed in him. He had saved many people in his career, but something about her was different. Her plight had touched him in a way he hadn't expected. Dawn was breaking when Zachariah finally rose, having dozed fitfully for only a few hours. He packed his gear efficiently, checked his weapons, and prepared Penny for another long ride. Thomas met him at the corral with provisions and a spare canteen. Sarah packed some food, Thomas said, handing over a small bundle, and there's extra ammunition in the saddlebag. Zachariah nodded gratefully. Take care of Beatrice. I should be back within a week. And if you're not, Thomas asked, his expression somber. Then do what you can to get her to safety, Zachariah replied. Maybe east, where Blackstone has less influence. Before mounting up, Zachariah returned to the house to check on Beatrice one last time. She was awake, propped up against pillows, looking pale but more alert than the previous day. You're leaving, she stated simply as he entered the room. Yes, he confirmed, but I'll be back as soon as I can. Beatrice studied him, her blue eyes clear now without the haze of fever. Why are you doing this, Zachariah? Truly, he considered her question, searching for an honest answer. Because it's right, he said finally, and because no one else will. A small smile touched her lips. A man of principle in a land with few, that's rare. Not as rare as you might think, he countered. There are good people everywhere, even in these territories. I hope you're right, she said softly. Be safe, Zachariah, and thank you for everything. He nodded, suddenly finding words difficult. Rest and recover. We'll figure out the rest when I return. With that, he turned and left, his steps heavy as he made his way back to where Penny waited. Thomas stood by, observing but not commenting on the emotions playing across his friend's face. Look after her, Zachariah said again as he mounted. Like she was my own daughter, Thomas promised. Now go do what you need to do and come back in one piece. With a final nod, Zachariah urged Penny forward, leaving the safety of the Wilson ranch behind as he rode toward an uncertain confrontation with Samuel Blackstone. The Blackstone Ranch was located 20 miles south of Columbus, an impressive spread with a large main house, extensive outbuildings, and hundreds of acres of grazing land. Zachariah approached cautiously, taking position on a ridge overlooking the property as the sun began to set. Through his field glasses, he observed the comings and goings around the ranch, cowboys returning from the range, servants moving between buildings, and guards posted at strategic points. Samuel Blackstone had built himself a veritable fortress in the desert. Zachariah watched for hours, noting routines and vulnerabilities. The main house was well guarded, but a smaller building to the east, likely an office or study, seemed less observed. As darkness fell, lights glowed in the windows of the main house, and the sounds of a gathering drifted up to his position. Having a celebration, are we? Zachariah muttered to himself, wondering if the recent bank robbery was the cause for festivities. He waited until well past midnight when the lights had dimmed and the property grew quiet, before making his move. Leaving Penny secured in a hidden arroyo, Zachariah approached on foot, using the darkness and scattered vegetation for cover. The first challenge was the perimeter guard, a bored-looking man smoking a cigarette while leaning against a fence post. Zachariah circled wide, coming up behind the guard and rendering him unconscious with a swift blow. He dragged the man into the shadows, securing his hands and feet with leather straps from his pack. Moving silently across the grounds, Zachariah made his way to the smaller building he had identified earlier. The door was locked, but a quick manipulation with a thin metal tool from his pocket remedied that situation. Inside, he found what appeared to be Samuel Blackstone's private office, a well-appointed room with a large desk, bookshelves, and a small safe in the corner. Zachariah worked quickly, searching through papers on the desk and in drawers, looking for anything connecting Blackstone to the bank robbery. In the bottom drawer, he found a ledger with suspicious entries, large sums deposited without clear sources. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a start. The safe presented a greater challenge. Zachariah pressed his ear against it, attempting to manipulate the tumblers as he had been taught years ago. After several tense minutes, he was rewarded with a soft click as the safe unlocked. Inside, he found stacks of cash, more than a man should have on hand, even a wealthy rancher. Beneath the money was a small leather pouch containing a distinctive gold pocket watch. Zachariah recognized it immediately as belonging to Sheriff Morgan, who had been killed during the bank robbery. "Got you," Zachariah whispered, pocketing the watch and closing the safe. It was the evidence he needed, the murdered sheriff's personal property in Blackstone's possession. As he turned to leave, Zachariah noticed a letter on the desk he had overlooked. It was addressed to Samuel Blackstone from his late brother James, dated just days before his death. Zachariah quickly scanned the contents, his pulse quickening as he read. The letter detailed James's intention to marry Beatrice, despite his brother's objections, and, more damning, his discovery of Samuel's involvement in various illegal activities, including cattle rustling and land fraud. James had threatened to expose his brother if he continued to interfere in his relationship with Beatrice. Zachariah carefully folded the letter and added it to the pocket watch. It wasn't just evidence of the bank robbery now, it was proof that Samuel had motive to kill his own brother and frame Beatrice for the crime. He was replacing papers on the desk when a floorboard creaked outside the office door. Zachariah froze, his hand moving to his pistol as the door slowly opened. A middle-aged man with silver-streaked dark hair and cold eyes stood in the doorway, a revolver pointed squarely at Zachariah's chest. "I thought we might have an unwelcome visitor," Samuel Blackstone said, his voice calm despite the situation. "My men reported seeing a rider watching the ranch earlier today." Zachariah kept his expression neutral. "Samuel Blackstone, I presume." "And you must be the man who's been asking questions in town," Blackstone replied, stepping fully into the room. "Though I admit I expected a lawman, not a common thief." "Not a thief," Zachariah countered. "A messenger. I'm here to let you know that your time is running out, Blackstone." Blackstone laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Is that so? And who's going to stop me?" "You," his eyes narrowed. "Or perhaps that Harper woman if she managed to survive the desert." Zachariah's jaw tightened at the mention of Beatrice, but he kept his composure. "Beatrice Harper is very much alive, and she's not alone in knowing what you did to your brother." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Blackstone's face before his confident mask returned. "My brother was killed by that woman. Everyone knows it." "Your brother was killed because he threatened to expose your crimes," Zachariah said, taking a calculated risk by revealing what he knew. His letter makes that quite clear. Blackstone's expression hardened. What letter? The one he sent you days before his death. The one where he promised to turn you in if you didn't leave him and Beatrice alone. The rancher's finger tightened on the trigger. You're bluffing. Am I, just like I'm bluffing about Sheriff Morgan's gold watch in your safe? The one taken from his body after you shot him during the bank robbery. Blackstone's composure slipped further, rage replacing his cold confidence. You know nothing, he snarled. I know enough to hang you, Zachariah replied evenly. The question is, how many of your men are willing to hang alongside you? Before Blackstone could respond, a commotion erupted outside, shouting, followed by gunshots. The rancher's attention wavered for a split second, and Zachariah seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, knocking Blackstone's gun aside as it discharged, the bullet splintering wood near Zachariah's head. The two men grappled, crashing into furniture as each fought for control. Blackstone was surprisingly strong for his age, but Zachariah had the advantage of training and experience. He managed to land a solid blow to Blackstone's jaw, sending the older man staggering backward. Zachariah drew his pistol, leveling it at Blackstone. It's over, Samuel. You're going to answer for what you've done to your brother, to Sheriff Morgan, and to Beatrice. Blackstone's eyes darted to the window, where the commotion outside had intensified. My men will kill you before you ever leave this ranch, he warned. I wouldn't be too sure about that, came a voice from the doorway. Zachariah risked a glance and was startled to see Thomas Wilson standing there, rifle in hand, with several armed men behind him. Tom, what are you doing here? Zachariah asked, keeping his pistol trained on Blackstone. Couldn't let you have all the fun, Thomas replied with a grim smile. Besides, I figured you might need backup when dealing with a snake like Blackstone. Blackstone's face twisted with fury. Wilson, you're a dead man, you and your entire family. I don't think so, Thomas countered. You see, we've already sent for the federal marshal. He should be here by morning. And we've secured your men, those who didn't run off when they realized the game was up. Zachariah kept his focus on Blackstone, seeing the calculation in the rancher's eyes. Don't try it, he warned. You won't make it 2 steps. For a moment it seemed Blackstone might risk it anyway, then his shoulders slumped, defeat replacing the fury in his expression. You've ruined everything, he said bitterly. No, Samuel, Zachariah replied. You did that yourself when you decided your wealth and power put you above the law. With Blackstone subdued and bound, Zachariah finally holstered his weapon. How did you know to come? He asked Thomas as they led the rancher out of the office. Beatrice, Thomas explained. She remembered a conversation she overheard between James and Samuel about a hidden ledger in the office. She was worried you might walk into a trap without knowing what you were looking for. So she sent you after me? Zachariah asked, surprised. Thomas chuckled. More like she tried to come herself. Sarah caught her trying to saddle a horse, weak as she was. After that, I figured I'd better come check on you before she did something foolish. Outside, the ranch had been secured by Thomas and his men. Several of Blackstone's cowboys were under guard, while others had apparently fled when the fighting started. What about the evidence? Thomas asked. Zachariah patted his pocket. I've got Sheriff Morgan's watch from Blackstone's safe, and James's letter proving Samuel had motive to kill him. Combined with the suspicious cash and the testimony of anyone willing to turn on Blackstone, it should be enough. Thomas nodded approvingly. Let's hope the marshal agrees. In the meantime, we'd better get this scum locked up somewhere secure. They decided to use the Blackstone Ranch's root cellar as a temporary jail, posting guards to ensure Samuel and his captured men couldn't escape before the marshal arrived. With the immediate danger contained, Thomas pulled Zachariah aside. "You should head back to the ranch," he suggested. "Let Beatrice know what happened. She's been worried sick about you." Zachariah hesitated, looking around at the secured prisoners. "Are you sure you don't need me here?" "We've got it covered," Thomas assured him. "Besides, I think there's someone who needs to see you more than we do right now." Zachariah felt a strange flutter in his chest at the thought of returning to Beatrice. "All right, I'll head back now." The journey to the Wilson Ranch seemed shorter on the return trip, perhaps because Zachariah's mind was occupied with thoughts of Beatrice. The sun was just beginning to rise when he arrived, casting the landscape in a golden glow that seemed fitting for his triumphant return. Sarah met him at the door, relief evident on her face. "Thank goodness you're all right," she said, ushering him inside. "Thomas." "He's fine," Zachariah assured her. "He and his men have Blackstone and some of his gang under guard, waiting for the marshal." Sarah nodded, clearly relieved. "Beatrice is in the garden. She insisted on getting some fresh air, though I told her she's still too weak to be up and about." Zachariah found her sitting on a bench beneath an apple tree, wrapped in a shawl despite the growing warmth of the morning. She looked up as he approached, her face lighting with a smile that made his heart skip. "Zachariah," she breathed, attempting to stand. "Stay seated," he urged, quickly moving to join her on the bench. "You should be resting." "I've done nothing but rest for days," she countered, though she remained seated. Her eyes searched his face anxiously. "Thomas, did he find you in time?" "He did," Zachariah confirmed. "Blackstone is in custody along with some of his men. The marshal is on his way." Relief washed over her features. "And the evidence? Did you find anything to clear my name?" Zachariah reached into his pocket, producing James's letter. "I found this in Blackstone's office. It's from James, written days before his death. He threatened to expose Samuel's illegal activities if he didn't leave the two of you alone." Beatrice took the letter with trembling hands, reading it slowly. Tears filled her eyes as she recognized the handwriting. "He was going to stand up to his brother just like he promised me. Samuel killed him for it," Zachariah said gently, "and then tried to blame you." Beatrice folded the letter carefully, her expression hardening. "Will it be enough to see him punished?" This, combined with Sheriff Morgan's watch found in his possession and the suspicious cash in his safe, should convince the marshal. And once Blackstone's men realize their boss is facing the gallows, some might be willing to testify against him to save themselves. Beatrice nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you, Zachariah, for believing me, for saving my life, for risking everything to bring Samuel to justice." The simple touch of her hand sent warmth spreading through him. "I only did what was right." "No," she disagreed softly. "You did more than that. You gave me back my life when no one else would have even stopped to help." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of the bond that had formed through their shared ordeal. Before Zachariah could respond, Sarah called from the house, announcing that breakfast was ready. The moment broke, but the connection remained as they walked back to the house together, Beatrice leaning slightly on Zachariah's arm for support. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The federal marshal arrived at the Blackstone Ranch and presented with the evidence Zachariah had gathered, formally arrested Samuel Blackstone and his accomplices for the murder of Sheriff Morgan during the bank robbery. Additional charges were added for the murder of James Blackstone once several ranch hands, seeing which way the wind was blowing, came forward with testimony about Samuel's threats against his brother. Beatrice's name was officially cleared, though the ordeal had left her with few options. Her small farm had been ransacked after her abduction, and she had little to return to in Columbus. "What will you do now?" Zachariah asked her one evening as they sat on the porch of the Wilson Ranch, watching the sunset paint the desert in vivid colors. She considered the question, absently running her fingers along the arm of her chair. "I'm not sure. I have some family back east, but—" She trailed off, her gaze turning to Zachariah. "What about you? Will you return to bounty hunting?" He shrugged, feeling strangely unsettled at the thought of returning to his solitary life on the trail. "I haven't decided. There's always another outlaw to track down." "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "To keep chasing danger?" Zachariah hadn't considered it in those terms before. For years, the pursuit of justice had been his purpose, his reason for moving forward. But now, sitting beside Beatrice in the peaceful evening, he found himself questioning that path. "I don't know any more," he admitted. "For a long time it was enough, but lately—" He let the thought hang unfinished between them. Beatrice seemed to understand what he couldn't articulate. "We all need something more than just a purpose, Zachariah. We need connections, people who matter to us." Their eyes met, and the intensity of her gaze made his heart pound. In the short time they had known each other, Beatrice had come to matter to him in ways he hadn't expected. Her courage, her resilience, her gentle strength, all drawing him to her like a moth to flame. "Beatrice," he began, uncertain how to express the feelings growing within him. She saved him from his fumbling attempt. "When I was buried in that desert," she said softly, "I thought I would die alone and forgotten. Then you found me. You fought for me when no one else would." Her hand moved across the space between them, covering his. "You gave me a second chance at life, Zachariah. I don't want to waste it." The warmth of her touch anchored him, making it easier to find the words. "I've spent years wandering these territories, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, but being here with you—" He turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. "It feels like I've found something I didn't know I was searching for." Beatrice's smile was radiant in the fading light. "Perhaps we both have." The days turned into weeks as Samuel Blackstone awaited trial in the territorial prison. Beatrice recovered her strength, helping Sarah around the ranch and slowly building a new life away from the shadows of her past. Zachariah remained as well, finding unexpected satisfaction in the steady work of ranch life alongside Thomas. But more than the work, it was Beatrice's presence that kept him there. Their connection deepened with each passing day, shared meals, quiet conversations, and gradually, tentative touches that spoke of growing affection. One clear evening, a month after Blackstone's arrest, Zachariah asked Beatrice to ride with him to a mesa overlooking the valley. They sat side by side as the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, a blanket spread beneath them on the rocky ground. "I received a letter today," Zachariah said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "From the marshal's office." Beatrice turned to him, her expression questioning. "About Blackstone," Zachariah nodded. "His trial is set for next month in Santa Fe. They want us both to testify." A shadow crossed her face at the prospect of facing her tormentor again, but she squared her shoulders resolutely. "Then we'll go. Together." "Together," he echoed, taking her hand. "Beatrice, I've been thinking about what happens after the trial, after justice is done." "And?" she prompted gently when he hesitated. Zachariah took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I don't want to go back to bounty hunting. I don't want to leave." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't want to leave you." The vulnerability in his admission hung in the air between them. Beatrice moved closer, her free hand coming to rest against his cheek. "Then don't," she whispered. "Stay with me, Zachariah. I don't have much to offer, he warned. No land, no fortune. Beatrice shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. I don't need those things. I just need you, your strength, your heart, your integrity. Zachariah's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer still. You have them, he promised. You have all of me if you want it. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if they were both afraid the moment might shatter like glass. Then Beatrice's arms wound around his neck, and the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of all that might lie ahead for them. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Zachariah rested his forehead against hers. I never expected to find you, he murmured, buried in the desert fighting for your life. Perhaps it was fate after all, she suggested, echoing their conversation from days before. Not bad luck, but destiny. Zachariah smiled, pulling her close as they gazed up at the star-filled sky. I think you might be right. The trial of Samuel Blackstone became a sensation throughout the New Mexico territory. People traveled from miles around to witness the downfall of the once powerful rancher. Beatrice and Zachariah testified on consecutive days, their accounts of Blackstone's crimes compelling and unshakable, despite aggressive questioning from the defense. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, the courtroom erupted in murmurs of approval. Samuel Blackstone, his face a mask of hatred, was sentenced to hang for the murders of his brother and Sheriff Morgan. As they left the courthouse, Beatrice leaned against Zachariah's side, emotionally drained but relieved. It's really over, she said softly. Yes, he agreed, his arm secure around her shoulders. He can't hurt anyone else now. They had discussed their future during the long journey to Santa Fe, making plans and sharing dreams. Thomas Wilson had offered Zachariah a partnership in his ranch, an opportunity to settle down while still using his skills and knowledge of the territory. I've been thinking, Beatrice said as they walked through the streets of Santa Fe back to their hotel, about your partner offer from Thomas. Oh, Zachariah prompted, curious about her thoughts. I think you should accept it, she said decisively. You're good with the land, good with the men. And she hesitated, a blush coloring her cheeks. It would give us a place to build a life together. Zachariah stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the weeks since their confession on the mesa, their relationship had blossomed, but they had yet to define exactly what their future would hold. Beatrice Harper, he said, taking both her hands in his. Are you asking me to marry you? Her blush deepened, but her eyes remained steady on his. I suppose I am, though traditionally you should be the one doing the asking. A grin spread across his face. I was planning to. I even bought a ring. He reached into his pocket, producing a small silver band set with a single blue stone that matched her eyes. It's not fancy, but it's perfect, she interrupted, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Zachariah dropped to one knee right there on the busy street, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. Beatrice Harper, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me wherever that may lead us? Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, Zachariah Daniels, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and gathered her into his arms, sealing their commitment with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and devotion. They were married 2 days later in a small church in Santa Fe, with Thomas and Sarah Wilson as their witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with genuine joy and hope for the future. Afterward, they began the journey back to the Wilson Ranch, now their home as well. What do you think about building our own place? Zachariah asked as they rode side by side across the desert. Thomas mentioned a nice spot near the creek that would be perfect for a house. Beatrice smiled, the sunlight catching the ring on her finger. I'd like that, something we build together. With a garden, he suggested, knowing how she missed working the earth. And maybe some fruit trees. And children someday, she asked softly, watching his reaction carefully. Zachariah's expression softened. I'd like that very much. Little ones with your courage and determination. And your sense of justice, she added warmly. They continued planning their future as they rode, their dreams taking shape with each mile that brought them closer to home. The desert around them, once a place of terror and death for Beatrice, now seemed full of promise and possibility. 3 years later, Zachariah stood on the porch of their completed home, watching as Beatrice knelt in her flourishing garden, their young son toddling beside her on unsteady legs. Matthew James Daniels had his mother's eyes and his father's determined chin, and at 18 months old, he was already showing signs of both their stubborn streaks. The Wilson Daniels ranch had prospered under their combined stewardship. Thomas had gradually turned over more responsibility to Zachariah, as he and Sarah contemplated a quieter life. The partnership had proved beneficial for all involved, bringing stability and success to their shared enterprise. Beatrice looked up from her gardening, catching Zachariah's gaze. The love that passed between them was as strong as ever, deepened by the years of building their life together. "Papa," Matthew called, spotting his father and beginning an unsteady run toward the porch. Zachariah descended the steps and swept his son into his arms, tossing him gently into the air and delighting in the boy's squeals of laughter. Beatrice joined them, brushing dirt from her hands onto her apron. "The tomatoes are coming along nicely," she reported, leaning in for a kiss. "We should have a good crop this year. Just like everything else you touch," Zachariah said admiringly. Under her care, the once barren patch of land around their house had transformed into a productive garden and orchard, providing fresh food for their table and enough surplus to share with neighbors. Beatrice's smile turned thoughtful. "I was thinking about that day," she said quietly. "When you found me in the desert." Zachariah shifted Matthew to his hip, his free arm encircling his wife's waist. "What brought that to mind? I heard about a woman in Tucson," she explained. "She was accused of theft and nearly lynched before someone intervened. It made me realize how lucky I was that you came along when you did." "It wasn't luck," Zachariah said firmly. "I was meant to find you, to save you." Beatrice leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "To love me, especially that," he affirmed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Matthew squirmed to be put down, eager to return to exploring the garden. As their son toddled back toward a row of bean plants, Beatrice turned in Zachariah's arms to face him fully. "I have something to tell you," she said, a mixture of excitement and nervousness in her voice. "What is it?" he asked, sensing the importance of her announcement. She took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "We're going to have another baby." Joy surged through Zachariah, and he lifted Beatrice off her feet in a jubilant embrace. "When?" he asked when he finally set her down. "Doctor Miller says sometime in the winter," she replied, her face glowing with happiness. "Around Christmas." "A Christmas baby," Zachariah marveled, his hand returning to rest on her still flat abdomen. "Matthew will be a big brother. And you'll be an even more wonderful father," Beatrice assured him, covering his hand with her own. As they stood together in the golden afternoon light, watching their son discover the world around him and contemplating the new life growing within Beatrice, Zachariah felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path that had led him to this moment, to this woman and this family, had begun with a desperate rescue in the desert, but it had blossomed into something more beautiful than he could have imagined. "I love you, Beatrice Daniels," he said softly, "more with each passing day." "And I love you, Zachariah Daniels," she responded, her eyes reflecting all the devotion in her heart. "My rescuer, my avenger, my love." Their lips met in a tender kiss, sealing once more the bond that had formed in the harshest of circumstances and flourished in the fertile ground of mutual respect, admiration, and deep, abiding love. In the years that followed, their family continued to grow. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth, arrived as predicted during the Christmas season, bringing new joy to their home. 2 years later, twins Joshua and Joseph completed their family, giving them 4 healthy children who filled their days with laughter and purpose. The Wilson Daniels Ranch expanded as well, becoming one of the most respected operations in the territory. Zachariah's reputation for fair dealing and Beatrice's community involvement made them valued members of society, far removed from the days when she had faced persecution, and he had lived a solitary existence. Occasionally, Zachariah would be called upon to help the local lawmen with particularly difficult cases, putting his tracking skills to use in service of justice. But he always returned home to Beatrice and their children, the wandering spirit that had once defined him now satisfied by the adventure of building a life with the woman he loved. They never forgot how they had found each other in the most desperate of circumstances, with Beatrice buried in the desert sand and Zachariah following a trail that fate had laid before him. That memory served as a reminder of how precious their life together was, and how easily it might never have been. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Zachariah took Beatrice on a special trip, leaving the children with Thomas and Sarah for a few days. They rode together to a beautiful vista overlooking the desert, where Zachariah had prepared a surprise. "What is all this?" Beatrice asked, dismounting to find a picnic laid out on a colorful blanket, with flowers and a bottle of wine waiting for them. 10 years deserves a celebration," Zachariah replied, helping her sit on the blanket. 10 years since you made me the happiest man in the territory." They enjoyed their meal as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. When they had finished, Zachariah produced a small wooden box from his saddlebag. "I had this made for you," he said, placing it in her hands. Beatrice opened it carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket. Inside was a miniature painting of their family, Zachariah, Beatrice, and all 4 children, captured in remarkable detail despite the small size. "Zachariah, it's beautiful," she breathed, immediately fastening it around her neck. "I'll treasure it always." "Just as I treasure you," he said, taking her hands in his. "Beatrice, these 10 years with you have been the best of my life. When I found you that day, I had no idea I was also finding my future, my happiness, my purpose." Tears glistened in her eyes as she squeezed his hands. "You saved more than my life that day, Zachariah. You saved my soul. You showed me that even in a world that can be cruel and unjust, there is still goodness and love to be found." They sat together as the sun set completely, the desert coming alive with stars overhead. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, their voices carrying on the night air. It was a wild land still, this territory they called home, but within it they had carved out a place of peace and prosperity. "You ever regret it?" Beatrice asked suddenly. "Settling down, giving up the freedom of the trail?" Zachariah considered her question seriously, as he always did. "Not for a single moment," he answered truthfully. "I thought I was free when I was wandering, but I was just lost. True freedom came when I found you, when I found our family." Beatrice leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly in the curve of his shoulder. "I feel the same. After James died and I was accused, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I could find such happiness again." They remained there long into the night, talking and remembering, planning and dreaming. When they finally rode home the next day, it was with renewed appreciation for the life they had built together and the love that had started in the most unlikely of circumstances. As the years continued to pass, their children grew into fine young adults. Matthew, the eldest, showed a talent for ranching and business that promised to carry the family legacy forward. Sarah Elizabeth became a teacher, bringing education to remote communities with the same passion her mother had once shown for justice. The twins, Joshua and Joseph, though identical in appearance, took different paths, Joshua becoming a doctor and Joseph a lawman, both serving their community in their own ways. Zachariah and Beatrice watched with pride as their children made their way in a world that was rapidly changing. The frontier was closing, railroads crisscrossed the land, and the Wild West was slowly becoming just the West. But the values they had instilled in their children, courage, integrity, compassion, remained constant in a changing world. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and dear friends, Zachariah and Beatrice stood hand in hand in the garden they had nurtured together for decades. Though their hair had silvered and time had etched lines on their faces, the love between them was as vibrant as ever. If someone had told me that day in the desert that I would find not just rescue but a lifetime of love, Beatrice said softly, I wouldn't have believed it possible. Zachariah brought her hand to his lips, kissing it tenderly. The best things in life are often the most unexpected. As the sun set on another day in the life they had built together, Zachariah and Beatrice Daniels stood as testimony to the power of courage, the strength of love, and the extraordinary journey that had begun with a desperate rescue in the desert sun.